We met on the road with our respective bands in 1966.
After years of silence, Benny Andersson, the musical genius behind ABBA, has finally broken his silence and confirmed the rumors we've all been wondering about. What really happened after ABBA ended? Did the band secretly fight behind the scenes? And why did Benny walk away from fame at the peak of it all? Stay tuned, because we've got the truth straight from Benny himself. No drama, just honesty. The quiet heart behind ABBA. Before the bright lights, and long before ABBA became one of the biggest music groups in the world, Benny Andersson was just a boy who was simply drawn to sound, to melodies, to the way music made people feel. Benny grew up in Sweden in a modest home. His family didn't have much, but there was always music. His father and grandfather played the accordion, and they passed that love of music down to him. It wasn't flashy music. It was Swedish folk songs, gentle melodies that told stories. Church music also surrounded him. Simple, beautiful harmonies that carried emotion in every note. These early sounds shaped Benny deeply. Long before he ever sat at a piano or touched a synthesizer, he was learning the soul of music, not just how to play it, but how to feel it. As he grew older, Benny became more curious. He didn't make music the traditional way. He didn't go to fancy schools or read sheet music fluently. Instead, he listened, played by ear, and followed his instincts. His talent came from emotion. He knew how to build feelings into sound. That natural skill would later become the foundation of one of the world's most beloved music groups. In the 1960s, Benny joined a Swedish pop band called the Hepstars. They were popular in Sweden, and Benny quickly became known as their musical brain. But it was when he met another young musician named Björn Ulvaeus that something magical began to form. Björn was smart, thoughtful, and full of ideas. He loved writing lyrics and building stories into songs. Benny, on the other hand, had the gift of melody and structure. Together they made a perfect pair. Not just co-writers, but musical soulmates. They began writing songs together. At first it was just for fun, but their songs started to stand out. There was something special in them, something clean, powerful, and emotionally honest. They weren't trying to copy anyone. They were making something new. Something that mixed Benny's deep understanding of musical harmony with Björn's clever storytelling. Soon their work grew into a new project, a band with their partners, Agnetha Falskog and Annifrid Frida Lyngstad. That band became ABBA. ABBA's rise was fast, especially after they won the Eurovision Song Contest in 1974 with Waterloo. Suddenly they were international stars. Crowds sang their songs, their records sold millions. The world couldn't get enough of their joyful, catchy hits. But while the spotlight shined on Agnetha and Frida, who sang with such emotion and style, Benny stayed in the background. He didn't mind. He wasn't looking for attention. He was focused on the music, making sure every note was right, every beat hit the heart just right. While the world danced to ABBA's hits, Benny was in the studio, sculpting the sound from behind the scenes. Benny wasn't just a songwriter, he was a builder. He carefully shaped music like a sculptor shapes clay. He would spend hours, even days, working on one small part of a song. He would listen again and again, adjusting a chord here, changing a harmony there. Not because he wanted perfection, but because he wanted truth. He wanted the song to feel real, to match the emotion in his heart. He chased feelings more than sounds. If a track didn't feel right, he would scrap it and start over. He didn't care about trends or popularity. He cared about honesty. Even in a song like Dancing Queen, with its upbeat rhythm and joyful tone, there is a sadness hiding underneath, a longing, a softness. That contrast came from Benny. It was his fingerprint. He believed that real music had layers, and he made sure every ABBA song had that emotional depth, even if the audience didn't always realize it. Working with Björn was a gift, but also a challenge. They were very different people. Benny was quiet and sensitive, more emotional than logical. Björn was thoughtful, practical, and focused on lyrics and structure. Together, they found balance. Benny poured emotion into the melodies, and Björn shaped the stories. That partnership created a kind of magic, songs that were simple on the outside but full of weight and feeling underneath. But with success came stress. ABBA wasn't just a music group anymore, it turned into a busy, non-stop operation. There were constant deadlines, high expectations, tours to plan, and public events to attend. As their fame grew, so did the emotional weight on everyone. Eventually, the pressure started to show. Tensions rose and competition within the group. That was bound to happen. The hidden struggles behind the spotlight. From the outside, ABBA looked like the perfect pop dream. Two beautiful women, two talented men, catchy songs, world tours, glittery outfits, and millions of fans. But behind the sparkling surface, the truth was much more complicated. While the music soared and the group smiled for cameras, quiet tensions hummed beneath the harmony. For years, fans and tabloids wondered if Annie Frid Lyngstad Frida and Agnetha Falskog were secretly rivals. They were both stunning, both talented, and both voices of one of the biggest pop groups in history. On stage, they stood side by side. In magazines, they were always compared. People whispered, was there jealousy, competition, a silent war for the spotlight? At first, both women denied it. They called each other sisters, partners, equals. And in many ways, that was true. They had shared dressing rooms, late-night rehearsals, exhausting tours, and emotional studio sessions. They knew the pressures only the other could understand. But over time, things changed. Frida had a darker, dramatic stage presence. Her voice was husky, soulful, and powerful. She could command a stage with just one look. But Agnetha had something else, the golden image, blonde, angelic, with a voice that soared like crystal. She was often seen as ABBA's front singer, the face on posters, the favorite in fan mail. Frida began to feel it, the shadow. In interviews, the questions leaned toward Agnetha. In photo shoots, the lens lingered on her longer. Frida, despite her own incredible talent, was often described as the second voice, the supporting act, the other woman in ABBA. That kind of comparison, subtle but constant, left a scar. Meanwhile, Agnetha carried her own weight. She didn't ask for the spotlight to tilt her way. She didn't create the image machine, but she had to live inside it. She felt boxed in, seen more as a pop doll than a serious artist. And she knew that when Frida looked at her, there might be something unspoken between them. Not hatred, but distance, a growing silence. In the studio, decisions about who would sing lead, whose voice would shine, began to carry more emotional weight. Sometimes it wasn't just about the music, it was about fairness. On tour, the pressure mounted. In public, they smiled. But in private, the friendship they once had began to fade. By the time ABBA quietly dissolved, Frida and Agnetha barely spoke. People believed the band ended peacefully, but insiders knew better. The heartbreak wasn't just between couples. It lived in the silence between two women who had once called each other sisters. And yet, there was another kind of silence running deeper, a silence the world rarely noticed. It didn't come from the women, it came from Benny Andersson. While Agnetha and Frida stood in the spotlight, Benny stood just behind it. In photos, he was there. In credits, his name appeared. But in people's minds, he was just one of the guys in ABBA, the man at the piano, the technician behind the songs. But Benny wasn't just playing notes. He was building ABBA's entire sound, chord by chord, layer by layer. While the world sang along to Dancing Queen, Benny was crafting emotional architecture underneath. He spent endless hours in the studio, obsessed with getting the feeling right. Not just the sound, but the emotion. He would adjust a harmony 20 times until it matched the longing in his heart. Still, when awards came or covers were printed, it was the women who got most of the attention. Their beauty, their style, their voices were what the cameras loved. Benny and Bjorn were labeled the brains behind ABBA, but it felt like a footnote, a polite nod, not real recognition. Benny wasn't jealous of the women. He admired them, but he was quietly hurt by how invisible his work became. He wasn't chasing fame, but he was chasing meaning. And when people called ABBA's songs bubblegum pop, they missed what those songs really held. Benny's pain, Benny's love, Benny's quiet need to be heard through music. He once said he was seen as the cold brain of ABBA, smart, technical, a mastermind behind the scenes. But that wasn't the truth. He was sensitive, emotional, driven by feelings too big for words. That's why he poured them into songs. To Benny, every melody was a message. Every bridge and chord progression was a piece of his soul. But the world rarely noticed. They praised the catchy chorus, the pretty outfits, the stage lights, but not the architecture of the music itself. As time passed, Benny grew tired of trying to explain. He knew he would never be the face of ABBA, but he also didn't want to be forgotten within it. He wasn't asking for applause. He was asking for understanding, a deeper kind of respect. For the late nights, the perfectionism, the silence he carried when things fell apart. Even today, people often remember Agnetha and Frida, their harmonies, their heartbreaks, their beauty. But Benny, the one who sculpted the emotion behind the songs, remains in the background. That invisibility became its own form of sorrow. And so, the real rivalry inside ABBA wasn't Agnetha versus Frida. It was Benny versus perception. Benny versus the world that saw a pop band and missed the poetry beneath it. Yes, the women faced intense pressure in the spotlight. They were expected to be perfect, flawless, beautiful, happy. But Benny faced something different. The quiet, constant fear of being erased from his own work. He has admitted, years later, that he used to read reviews hoping someone would notice the musical risks he took, the way he used silence, the emotional layering, the structure that gave the songs their power, but few ever did. That stung more than people realized. Now, in his later years, Benny has made peace with the silence. He no longer needs the headlines. He has moved on to film scores, musicals, and orchestral work. In those spaces, he can be fully himself. He has control. And yet the old frustration lingers like an echo because he knows what he gave, and he knows how little of it was seen. This isn't about ego, it's about the truth. Benny Andersson was not just the man behind the music, he was the music, the emotion, the sorrow, the depth people felt in ABBA's greatest songs. Those came from him. Not just as a composer, but as a man using melody as a language for things he couldn't say out loud. ABBA may be remembered for its glamour and glory, for the voices of two incredible women, for the glitter and the charts and the unforgettable choruses. But behind it all was Benny. He didn't need to win a rivalry, he needed to be understood. And even if the world never truly sees it, the truth remains. ABBA's soul lived in the quiet spaces Benny filled with sound. But that wasn't the only real tension, there was more. ABBA's power couple. ABBA was a story of 4 lives that crossed in melody and emotion. Among those 4 lives were Benny Andersson and Annifrid Frida Lyngstad, the band's second power couple. Their romance didn't begin with a bang, it was quiet, almost accidental, born not in candlelit moments, but in the silence between musical notes. They weren't drawn together by instant passion, instead it was music that brought them close, music that let them speak without words. Frida, with her fiery spirit and raw energy, brought a vibrant presence into every studio session. Benny, more quiet and reflective, found his comfort in melody, in chords that expressed what he often couldn't say aloud. She felt her emotions deeply and spoke them plainly. He hid his behind piano keys and sheet music. Their differences made their songs richer, but in real life, those same differences created cracks that slowly deepened. They found comfort in each other at first, 2 artists who understood the loneliness of the stage, the cost of fame, and the healing power of song. But even as their relationship blossomed creatively, it was quietly unraveling emotionally. Frida had grown up with loss and abandonment. Benny had learned from a young age to keep his feelings inside. When words failed, they turned to music. Lyrics became their language. Songs became their shelter. But using music as therapy only worked for so long. It helped them connect in the studio, but at home it left much unsaid. Frida needed presence and emotional honesty. Benny needed space and control. Frida sang their truth in front of millions. Benny arranged it from behind the curtain. She cried in lyrics. He avoided confrontation through composition. In interviews, Benny later admitted that he was more emotionally open in his songs than in real life. He could write about heartbreak, but struggled to sit and speak about it face to face. He said that he gave his best lines to songs, not to the people who needed to hear them from him. That quiet confession casts new light on their years together. Their breakup wasn't a single moment of betrayal. It was years of unspoken needs and emotional mismatch. By the time they married in 1978, their relationship had already weathered years of tension. The marriage was more of a patch than a foundation. Just 2 years later, in 1980, they separated. In 1981, they divorced. At the time, it was labeled a happy divorce, but the reality was much darker. Frida was devastated. When Benny quickly moved on with Mona Norklit, a television producer he later married, Frida felt abandoned. She didn't just lose a husband, she lost a creative partner and a piece of the dream they had built together. Frida was open about her heartbreak. She felt humiliated, discarded. She had given everything, her voice, her energy, her soul, to ABBA and to Benny. His quick transition to a new life felt like betrayal, not just romantically, but artistically. The group had always been a family. Now that family was breaking apart. Benny, for his part, struggled in silence. He wasn't trying to hurt Frida, he simply couldn't be what she needed. He has said that music was his way of coping, his shield against emotions he didn't know how to face. But that shield also kept him from showing up in the moments that mattered most. Their split rippled through the group. The first ABBA couple, Bjorn Ulvaeus and Agnetha Fältskog, had already divorced in 1980, but Benny and Frida's breakup was different. It came with bitterness, resentment, and accusations. Frida, never one to hide her feelings, reportedly clashed with Benny over the band, over their shared history, and over the pain left behind. Looking back now, Benny has started speaking more openly. At 78, he reflects with honesty and humility. He doesn't blame Frida, he sees her clearly now, her strength, her pain, her passion, and he sees himself with clarity too. He admits that he let music speak for him when he should have spoken himself. The breakup of ABBA, a slow decline. In the 1970s, ABBA was one of the most loved music groups in the world. Their songs played on radios everywhere, happy, catchy tunes that made people sing and dance. But behind those smiles was a different story. At first, everything seemed perfect. ABBA had just won the Eurovision Song Contest in 1974 with Waterloo, and their fame exploded. They released hit after hit, Mamma Mia, Dancing Queen, Take a Chance on Me, and many more. They toured the world. Crowds cheered, lights flashed, money poured in, but with fame came pressure. The group was constantly working, traveling, and performing. It left little time for anything else, especially love and family. After the power couple's divorce, the group kept going. They kept making music together, even though the love that had once held them close was fading. The sparkle in their eyes on stage started to dim. The smiles became more like masks. Behind closed doors, the band members were tired emotionally and creatively. When ABBA began, the music was fresh and exciting. They were discovering sounds, experimenting with melodies, and singing with heart. But after years of touring, writing, and performing, the joy started to slip away. For Benny, something important changed. One day, as they were working on another song, he realized he didn't feel the same thrill he used to. The songs no longer made him feel excited. They sounded good, yes, but something was missing. That something was honesty. The songs no longer felt real to him. He wasn't creating from the heart, he was just doing his job. He said later that by the time ABBA began to slow down, he was staying in the band out of guilt, not out of love for the music. He felt responsible for their success and didn't want to let down the fans or the others. But inside, he knew the magic was gone. The fun that had brought them together was fading. It's hard to laugh and sing with people when you're all hurting. The band tried to carry on, but the energy just wasn't the same. Every rehearsal, every recording session started to feel heavier. It was like they were pushing a giant weight up a hill with no end in sight. You might expect a famous band like ABBA to have a huge farewell, maybe a last concert, a press announcement, or even a goodbye album. But that didn't happen. Instead, ABBA just stopped. There was no big meeting, no emotional conversation, no plans for the future. They didn't even say, "Let's take a break." They simply stopped working together. Slowly, without saying the words out loud, they drifted apart. Benny said it felt strange that they never really talked about it. No one asked, "Are we done?" It just became clear. Everyone felt it, but no one wanted to be the one to say it first. Frida, for her part, had already begun to move on. She had emotionally stepped away from ABBA even before the final silence came. She needed space, a new chapter. She was ready to leave the past behind. But for Benny, it wasn't so easy. Even though they stopped making music together in 1982, it took him many more years to understand what had really happened. He didn't just leave a band, he left behind a part of himself. And for a long time, he carried the sadness of that goodbye he never got to say. The end of ABBA wasn't like a building exploding, it was like a slow leak. Little by little, the energy drained out. The songs didn't sparkle the way they used to. The group had poured so much of themselves into the music for so long that they didn't have anything left to give, at least not together. Fans and reporters looked for a scandal, a fight, or some dramatic event, but there wasn't one. The truth was quieter and more human. They were simply exhausted, creatively, emotionally, personally. ABBA had given their hearts to the world, but in doing so, they had nothing left for each other. Even after they stopped making music, the pressure didn't disappear. People still wanted more hits, more concerts, more ABBA. The expectations never ended. It was like being trapped in a story that had already ended, but no one wanted to close the book. Once the band stopped, each member began a new journey. Looking back, Benny now sees the end of ABBA not as a scandal or a mistake, but as something that had to happen. The group had run its course. They had created magic for nearly a decade, but magic doesn't last forever. For him, the real pain wasn't the silence that followed, but how unspoken everything had been. The band never talked about their feelings. They didn't give each other space to say goodbye. It just ended, quietly, like snow falling in the night, soft and unnoticed. Benny calls that time a kind of creative death. The songs had stopped coming from the heart, and without heart, there could be no real ABBA. He now knows that staying in the band out of guilt only made things harder. They had built something beautiful, but holding on too long only made the parting more painful. ABBA's ending was quiet, but their legacy is loud. Their songs still play around the world. People still sing Dancing Queen at weddings, in cars, in karaoke bars. Though the band members have gone their separate ways, the sound they created together is timeless. It was built with passion, truth, and connection, even if that connection didn't last forever. And maybe that's what makes it so powerful. The end of ABBA wasn't a failure. It was a natural human unraveling. People change, feelings fade, dreams shift. And sometimes even the greatest things must end so new stories can begin. But the songs, they're forever. But how did Benny handle the breakup? Did he move on to solo career? What was it like for him? The music continued. Benny Andersson's life beyond ABBA. When ABBA slowly faded from the spotlight in the early 1980s, the world moved on. But while the world kept celebrating ABBA, Benny Andersson felt something entirely different. Inside, he was quiet, not just musically, but emotionally. That silence wasn't peaceful at first. It came with sadness, exhaustion, and the need to heal. Benny didn't make a dramatic exit from the music scene. He didn't vanish or make headlines. He simply stepped back. After years of fame, constant travel, and intense pressure, he needed space to breathe. ABBA had been a global success, but behind the glamour was a great deal of strain. Benny had carried much of the group's musical weight. He was one of the composers and arrangers working behind the scenes to craft the sound that millions would love. But it came at a cost. Personal struggles, a failed marriage, burnout, and a deep emotional fatigue that success couldn't fix. Once ABBA stopped recording and performing together, Benny didn't have a clear path forward. He wasn't interested in chasing more pop hits or staying in the spotlight. Instead, he turned inward and began writing music in a very different way. He started composing for theater, film, and orchestras. These creative spaces gave him the freedom he had missed during his time in ABBA. He didn't have to worry about what was popular. He could simply express himself. This quieter chapter of his life brought new projects that were deeply personal. Two of the most important were the musicals Chess and Kristina Fran Duvemåla. Chess, created with Bjorn Ulvaeus and lyricist Tim Rice, used the game of chess to tell a story about Cold War politics. But for Benny, it was more than that. It was a chance to write honest music full of emotion without trying to make a radio hit. Kristina Fran Duvemåla was even more meaningful. It told the story of Swedish immigrants moving to America in the 1800s. Through this musical, Benny worked through some of his own buried emotions. It gave him a way to release sadness and pain that had built up during ABBA's most intense years. During the 1990s, Benny also began writing a private journal. In it, he included letters to his former bandmates, Frida, Agnetha, and Bjorn. These letters were never sent. They were personal and honest, filled with feelings he hadn't been able to express during ABBA's peak. He wrote about guilt, about regrets, about things that had gone unsaid. He reflected on love that had faded and friendships that had been tested. Writing these letters helped him process what had happened during those whirlwind years. For Benny, they were an important part of his emotional recovery. With time and distance, Benny gained clarity. He understood the ABBA years more clearly from afar than he ever could while living through them. Back then, he had been caught in the fast-moving world of fame, always focused on the next song, the next tour, the next public appearance. There had been little time to reflect, little time to simply feel. But now, in his quiet post-ABBA life, he could finally think about what it had all meant. He realized that true success didn't come from chart rankings or sold-out arenas. It came from being able to write something honest, something that touched the heart. As he grew older, he stopped needing outside approval. He began writing music for himself, not for the world. That shift gave him peace, but also a quiet sadness. There was still some emotional distance between him and his past. The band had never officially broken up. The friendships had never completely ended. But there were wounds that hadn't fully healed, and conversations that had never happened. In his later years, Benny found purpose in mentoring young Scandinavian musicians. He didn't try to be a star producer or seek attention. Instead, he shared his wisdom quietly. He taught them about melody, harmony, and technique, but more importantly, he taught them about emotional honesty. He told stories from his own life, from the dizzying highs of ABBA to the private lows he had faced along the way. Benny wanted these young artists to understand that being successful wasn't just about being famous. It was about staying true to your voice, even when the world is loud. He told them that it was okay to slow down, to feel deeply, and to write music that matters, not just music that sells. In stepping out of the spotlight, Benny didn't disappear. He grew. He became more than the man who helped create ABBA's timeless sound. He became a full artist, someone who had lived through intense fame and came out on the other side with deeper understanding. He once said that, in his youth, success meant being number one. Now it means playing something beautiful on the piano that brings him to tears, or helping someone else find their voice. His journey was not quick or easy. It came through loss, silence, and years of inner searching. But in that journey, Benny Andersson found himself not as a pop star, but as a man who found peace through music and meaning through truth. Today, his songs still echo in the world, and his quiet wisdom continues to shape the next generation. Even in exile from fame, Benny remains one of music's most honest voices. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.